Everyone thought the shy 6-year-old girl would be forgotten at her school function, until a young 37-year-old millionaire walked in. He knelt before her, held her tiny hand, and gave her the respect she never expected. This heartwarming moment changed her life forever. Ronnie Tyson sat in his office, high above the bustling city. The walls of glass reflected his empire, skyscrapers he had built, towers that touched the clouds, and streets filled with people who admired his power but never truly knew him. At only 37, he was already the kind of man others whispered about. They called him ruthless in business, brilliant with deals, and a genius of wealth. But behind the sharp suits and polished shoes lived a man with an empty silence in his heart. His mansion was grand, filled with chandeliers and marble floors, yet every night he returned to its quiet halls alone. No laughter of children echoed there. No gentle voice waited for him. He had everything people dreamt of, yet he carried nothing that made life tender. That morning, while he was reading reports, his assistant walked in holding an envelope. It wasn't like the sleek white ones from investors or the golden ones from elite charity balls. This one was cream-colored, with a small emblem of a school drawn in cheerful ink. She hesitated, as though unsure whether to hand such a simple letter to a man of his stature. "Sir," she said softly, "this came from the local elementary school." Ronnie looked up, his brows tightening. "An elementary school?" His voice carried curiosity more than annoyance. "Yes," the assistant replied, a small smile tugging at her lips. "The principal invited you as a special guest for their annual school function. They said the children admire you." For a moment, Ronnie almost chuckled. Him? Admired by children? He was used to being admired by businessmen, respected by rivals, feared by competitors. But children? Children didn't know the worth of skyscrapers or the weight of millions. What could they possibly admire about him? He turned the envelope over in his hands. The paper was simple, almost fragile compared to the thick, glossy invitations he usually received. Something about its innocence pierced through his armor. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the city skyline. He could almost hear his younger self whispering from a forgotten corner of memory. The boy who once stood outside school dances because no one invited him. The boy who wished someone important would notice him. The boy who had longed for a father's hand to guide him but had been left with none. A strange pull stirred in his chest. He tried to brush it off. "This isn't my type of event," he thought. But then again, why did he feel something so heavy and warm pressing inside his heart? Perhaps it was loneliness speaking. Or perhaps destiny was nudging him toward a night he would never forget. The assistant waited quietly, as though sensing his inner war. Finally, Ronnie placed the envelope on his desk and gave a slow nod. "Tell them," his voice softened unexpectedly, "tell them I'll be there." The assistant's eyes widened slightly. She hadn't expected him to agree so quickly. She nodded, almost touched by the unusual gentleness in his tone. When she left, Ronnie leaned forward and rested his elbows on the desk. He stared once more at the envelope, and a faint smile curved his lips. He didn't know why he had agreed. All he knew was that something about that school, about those children, called to the forgotten child inside him. And somewhere deep inside, though he didn't realize it yet, fate had already started writing a story that would change not only his life, but also the life of a little girl waiting quietly in that very school. At the same little school, while balloons were being tied and chairs were being set up for the big night, a small girl sat quietly in her classroom corner. Her name was Hazel Zoe, and though she was only 6 years old, her heart carried more weight than many grown-ups could bear. Hazel was different. Not in her spirit, for she was tender and bright, but in the way the world judged her. Her hair, soft and curly like threads of golden sunshine, framed her innocent face. Her eyes were wide, ocean blue, carrying both wonder and sadness at once. To anyone who looked closely, Hazel was beautiful in the purest, most delicate way. But most people didn't look closely. They only noticed her clothes, her shoes, and the things she didn't have. She lived with her aunt in a small house at the edge of town. Her parents had gone away far for work, sending money when they could, but leaving Hazel without their daily hugs or comforting voices. Her aunt did her best, but life was hard, and there was little money left for extras. So Hazel wore shoes that were too tight, the leather peeling at the edges. Her simple dress had been washed so many times it had faded, its fabric soft but worn thin. The other children noticed. Children always noticed. "Look at Hazel's dress," one girl giggled one morning, loud enough for everyone to hear. "She looks like she came from the thrift shop," a boy whispered. But his whisper was sharp as a knife, and the others burst into cruel laughter. Hazel's cheeks burned red, her throat tightened, and her eyes filled with tears she didn't want to let fall. She turned her face away, pretending not to hear, pretending not to care, but inside she felt small, so very small. Yet Hazel carried a secret the other children didn't know, a secret that kept her going when nights were long and mornings were cold. Hazel loved to dance. When the world grew unkind, she shut the door to her little bedroom, stood barefoot on the old wooden floor, and let music from a small radio guide her steps. She twirled, she leaped, she swayed, her body telling stories her lips were too shy to speak. Her dance was clumsy at times, but her heart was always true. Dancing was the only time she forgot the teasing, the loneliness, and the ache of missing her parents. The principal of the school, a kind woman who sometimes noticed what others ignored, had seen Hazel dancing once by accident. She had been walking past the classroom during recess and saw Hazel spinning softly when she thought no one was watching. The movement was shy but filled with passion, like a butterfly testing its wings. The principal's heart had melted. She had given Hazel a special part in the annual function, a solo dance on stage. "You have something special, Hazel," she had told her with a gentle smile. "Don't hide it, show it." But now, as the day of the event drew near, Hazel's courage shook. She sat on the little wooden bench in her room, clutching her shoes in her small hands. The memory of cruel laughter echoed in her ears. What if they laughed again? What if she tripped? What if they all stared and whispered the way they always did? Her blue eyes shimmered with tears she refused to let fall. She pressed her hand against her chest, feeling her heart racing. She wanted to believe in her dream. She wanted to believe that even a little girl with worn-out shoes could shine. But she was only 6, and the world around her had been so quick to make her feel less. Still, deep inside, there was a tiny flame, quiet, trembling, but alive. Hazel Zoe's secret dream whispered to her, "Dance anyway." And without knowing it, fate was already arranging a pair of strong hands and a kind heart to step into her story, a man who would see her not for her shoes or her dress, but for the light in her soul. The evening arrived, and the little school hall glowed like a treasure box. The walls were strung with colorful balloons. Fairy lights shimmered like tiny stars, and the air buzzed with excitement. Parents filled the seats, whispering proudly about their children. The hum of chatter mixed with the rustling of programs and the sound of little feet running across the polished floor. Teachers moved quickly between the rows, adjusting decorations, calming nervous children, and making sure everything looked perfect for the night. Then, as the lights dimmed slightly, the doors opened. A tall figure stepped inside. For a moment, the entire hall seemed to hold its breath. Ronnie Tyson had arrived. In his black tailored suit, he looked every inch the powerful man the city admired. His broad shoulders, steady stride, and calm presence drew every eye in the room. Parents nudged each other, whispering in awe. Children's eyes grew wide, as though a king had walked into their school. The principal hurried to greet him, her face glowing with pride. She led him to the very front row, where a chair had been reserved with a golden ribbon. "Mr. Tyson, thank you for coming," she said warmly, her voice trembling with respect. Ronnie gave her a small, polite smile. "It's my honor," he replied, though inside, he felt a strange heaviness in his chest. He wasn't sure why, but something about the laughter of children echoing in the hall felt foreign, yet painfully familiar. The program began. One by one, children sang songs with sweet, shaky voices. Some played instruments, their little fingers fumbling over keys and strings. Others acted in short plays, bringing giggles and applause from the crowd. Parents clapped proudly, snapping photos and whispering praises. But as the performances continued, Ronnie noticed one little girl waiting near the side of the stage. Her hands clutched the hem of her dress, her blue eyes wide with nerves. She wore a simple white dress that seemed too plain compared to the sparkling costumes of others. Yet there was something fragile and innocent about her presence that caught his attention. Her name, he remembered from the program, was Hazel Zoe. Finally, the announcer called her name. Hazel took a shaky step forward. The lights bathed her small frame, and her shadow stretched across the stage floor. She looked so tiny under the heavy glow. Her hands trembled as she lifted her arms into position. The music began, soft, graceful, like a whisper of hope. Hazel tried to move with it, her feet tracing the steps she had practiced night after night alone in her room. But before she could lose herself in the rhythm, a cruel sound broke the silence. Giggles. It started small, then grew louder. A group of children in the audience cupped their hands over their mouths, pointing at her. "Look at her shoes!" one boy snickered, his voice sharp enough to cut. "She's so awkward," another child whispered, and a wave of laughter followed. Hazel's breath caught in her throat. Her cheeks burned crimson. Her tiny body froze as though trapped in ice. She tried to move again, but her knees wobbled. Her heart pounded so hard it echoed in her ears. The lights felt hotter, brighter, blinding her. The music kept playing, but she could no longer hear it. Tears stung her eyes, blurring the faces in front of her into a sea of mocking shadows. In that moment, Hazel wanted to run, to disappear, to hide somewhere no one could ever laugh at her again. Her little dream of dancing, the one secret she held so dearly, was crumbling right there on stage, in front of everyone. And while the room filled with cruel laughter, one man in the front row clenched his jaw, his eyes narrowing as a surge of protectiveness rose deep inside him. Ronnie Tyson had seen enough. The cruel giggles still echoed in the air, bouncing off the decorated walls of the hall. Hazel stood frozen, her little chest rising and falling with sharp, frightened breaths. She wished the floor would open up and swallow her whole. Then suddenly, a chair scraped against the polished wooden floor with a loud screech. Every single head turned, conversations hushed, even the laughter died mid-breath. Ronnie Tyson had risen from his seat. The powerful millionaire, the man whose very presence commanded respect in boardrooms, now stood with his tall frame casting a shadow across the stage. His sharp gray eyes swept through the audience like a storm cutting through the air. The playful giggles melted into silence, leaving only the sound of Hazel's quickened heartbeat and the faint music still playing in the background. The children who had mocked her shrank into their chairs, their faces pale. The parents shifted uncomfortably, suddenly aware of their own silence when the teasing began. Ronnie's gaze softened when it fell on Hazel. The trembling little girl looked so small, her arms stiff at her sides, her chin lowered as if expecting to be scolded. For a moment, Ronnie's chest tightened. He saw not Hazel alone, but a reflection of his younger self. A boy who had once been ridiculed for not having what others had. A boy who had been left to stand alone. Slowly, with measured steps, Ronnie began walking toward the stage. His polished shoes clicked against the floor, each sound echoing like a drum beat in the silent hall. Hazel's tiny body shook harder with every step he took. Her teary eyes widened. She thought the great CEO would tell her to step down, to leave the stage she had failed to conquer. But when he reached her, Ronnie Tyson did something no one expected. He bent down. Lowering his powerful frame to meet her at eye level, he extended a hand toward her trembling fingers. His deep voice, usually so firm and commanding, softened into something tender, something Hazel had never heard from a stranger before. "May I have this dance, little lady?" he asked gently. The hall gasped collectively. Parents covered their mouths. Teachers stared in disbelief, and the children who had laughed sat frozen in shock. Hazel blinked, hardly able to breathe, Her mind spun. A millionaire? The man everyone admired? He wanted to dance with her? The girl in worn shoes and a simple dress? For a moment, Hazel hesitated, her small fingers twitching nervously. Then, as if guided by something greater than courage, her tiny hand slipped into his large, steady one. Ronnie's hand was warm, firm, and safe. The moment their palms touched, Hazel felt a rush of comfort she had never known before. Her fear melted, replaced by a spark of wonder. The music started again, soft and flowing. This time, Hazel didn't stand frozen. Ronnie guided her gently, his movements strong but graceful, matching her small steps with ease. When she stumbled, he steadied her. When she twirled shyly, he spun her lightly, making her laugh for the first time that night. Her giggle rang out, pure, bright, and innocent. A sound so beautiful it filled the entire hall, bouncing off the fairy-lit walls and landing straight in the hearts of everyone watching. And as Hazel danced, no longer alone but with a man who believed in her, the crowd sat in stunned silence. For the first time that evening, they weren't laughing. They were watching magic unfold. The fairy lights above flickered softly, casting a golden glow across the stage as Hazel twirled in Ronnie Tyson's arms. What had started as a moment of fear was now something no one in the room would ever forget. The music rose and fell, carrying the rhythm of hope, and Hazel followed it with light steps that seemed to float across the stage. The same children who had once pointed fingers and giggled now sat frozen, their eyes wide, their laughter silenced by the sight before them. It was as if their childish cruelty had been wiped away, replaced by awe. They saw not a poor girl with worn-out shoes, but a dancer, graceful and radiant, shining brighter than the lights themselves. Parents leaned toward each other, whispering softly. Some had smiles tugging at their lips, others dabbed at their eyes with tissues, overcome by the unexpected beauty of the moment. They had come expecting a simple school program, but they were witnessing something extraordinary, a lesson wrapped in the innocence of a child and the kindness of a man who had everything, yet chose to share it with someone who had nothing. Hazel's joy filled the hall like light pouring through windows after a storm. Her fear was gone, replaced by pure laughter, the kind only a child's heart could create. Every spin made her curls bounce. Every twirl made her eyes sparkle like blue gems, and her smile glowed so brightly it seemed to melt the coldness from the crowd's hearts. And Ronnie Tyson, powerful, untouchable Ronnie, looked down at her as though the entire world had disappeared, leaving only this one little girl. His gray eyes softened, and for the first time in many years, warmth flickered there. To him, Hazel was not just a child on stage. She was the most important person in the room, the one who reminded him that innocence and courage were worth more than skyscrapers and bank accounts. As the music reached its final notes, Ronnie spun Hazel one last time, releasing her gently as she landed with both arms stretched wide. The crowd held its breath for a moment, as if the entire hall had paused to capture the sight. Then, applause. It erupted like thunder rolling through the room. Parents rose to their feet. Teachers clapped with pride. Even the children who had mocked Hazel moments ago now clapped until their hands stung, their faces flushed with guilt and admiration. Hazel bowed shyly, her little cheeks burning red, but this time it was not from shame. It was from happiness. She lifted her head slowly, her eyes shining as she looked at Ronnie. Ronnie placed his strong hand on her small shoulder, steady and proud. It was a gesture that told the world, she matters, she belongs, she is enough. And in that moment, something shifted forever. Hazel Zoe was no longer the girl others mocked for her dress or shoes. After the event, Ronnie met Hazel's aunt. He promised to support Hazel's education and dreams. She has a gift, he said. No child should be laughed at for being different. The next day, the children who had once teased Hazel now wanted to be her friends. They realized their laughter had been cruel. The teachers spoke about kindness, respect, and how judging others by clothes or wealth was wrong. Hazel's life changed. She was no longer the quiet girl hiding in the corner. She was the little dancer who taught everyone about courage. And Ronnie Tyson, the millionaire, left that night with something money could never buy: a full heart. The lesson: in a society that often judges people by wealth, clothes, or status, kindness can change everything. True greatness is not in money or power, but in lifting up those who are laughed at and giving them the courage to shine.